from PRX.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and friends beyond the binary, it's time for the podcast that asks, how cold is the other side of the pillow? The answer's ice cold, but don't shake your pillow like a Polaroid picture. Hug it like it's a polar bear. And why are you getting this advice? Because it's time for Sleep With Me, the podcast that puts you to sleep. And that's it. Let's keep the show going. All right, everybody, it's time to talk about tonight's sponsor, Helix Sleep, and they've got some amazing deals coming up. You're going to hear about it at the end of this ad read, so do not miss out. I want you to right now to open up your phone. Just do it with me. I'm going to go to helixsleep.com/sleep, and if I were you, I wouldn't want to, I don't know what your relationship with your bed is right now. I've had a long-term relationship with my Helix mattress. It fits my needs, how I sleep. I sleep on my side, I sleep on my stomach, but now I'm sleeping more on my back, and I'm relocating, and unfortunately, I'm not in a position where I could ship my mattress because I have to move my stuff before I move, but that's okay. It means I get a new Helix, so I'm going to take the Helix quiz right now, helixsleep.com/sleep, 30 seconds, and you give, one or two sleepers, one, okay, let me put in my email. Put in my name here, give a little bit of information. Okay, what size mattress am I considering? I got that down. All right. I don't know if are you taking this quiz with me at helixsleep.com/sleep? All right, toss. I guess I toss and turn. So I'm going to pick toss and turn. And what kind of firmness? Okay, I'm going to pick my firmness that fits my needs. I'm not going to say it because I don't want to get yours, Okay, I'm going to talk about my back there, talk about temperature. All right, I got matched with my mattress. Oh, boy, and it's a different one than I have now just because I made a couple changes to how I sleep. So I'm going to check this out and think about it for my next Helix I'm going to be sleeping in. So take that Helix quiz. It's going to be coming right to your door, but most of all, it'll be a mattress that fits you, your needs, and how you sleep. And the best news is that Helix has amazing deals for Sleep With Me listeners, but only if you use our link. So go to helixsleep.com/sleep for 25% off site-wide during their extended Labor Day sale. That's helixsleep.com/sleep for 25% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name after checkout so they know we sent you. helixsleep.com/sleep. Thanks, everybody. Hey, you up all night tossing, turning, mind racing, trouble getting to sleep, trouble staying asleep? Well, welcome. This is Sleep With Me, the podcast that puts you to sleep. We do with a bedtime story. All you need to do is get in bed, turn out the lights, and press play. I'm going to do the rest. What I'm going to attempt to do is create a safe place where you can set aside whatever's keeping you awake. Thoughts, feelings, sensations, temperature, ups and downs, twists and turns, whatever's keeping you awake, whether it's inside, outside, or around you, or where you are. I'd like to help. I'd like to distract you. It's part of the safe place to make you feel comfortable, to earn your trust. Those are other layers of the safe place. I'd like to make it as comfortable as I possibly can. And the way I'm going to do that to start out is to send my voice across the deep, dark night. I'm going to use a lulling, soothing, creaky, dulcet tones, pace. I think it's a languid pace. Or I'll just use words like languid that are lovely, even if I don't, totally know their meaning or pronunciation. I'll be using, I'm going to sneak in some word usage. It may be, non-proper, word usage, but I'll be doing my best to say, well, that's languid. Not quite liquid, but it's languid. I'd like your say, well, it'd be nice if my shoulders felt languid. But I'm going to try and make you feel comfortable. If you're new, here's the structure of the show. Here's what to expect. The first 4 minutes or less, ideally, are business. That's how we keep the podcast and over 600 archived episodes free. Is all the people that act on that stuff at the beginning, whether it's the sponsors or listener support. But if you're new, it's not super important. Thanks for sticking through that. And then we have an intro, which we've begun here. The intros are normally around 12 minutes or so. And the idea is to set the tone. if you're new, so you get an idea of what to expect, which is not exactly the unexpected, but you say, like if there was a word where you combined unexpected and couldn't make any sense of it, like not senseless, like kind of like you're shrugging your shoulders out of surprise. Like you'd say, well, that was unsensibly expected, like a word, but might be a word. I don't think language fits there. What was I talking about anyway? Like, I guess that would be your reaction to the podcast. Oh, during the intro. So I try to, like, the intro tries to set the mood for the podcast. Then we'll have about a 45-minute, 50-minute, this week it'll be our episodic series about a girl raised by a theme park. Kind of. I mean, like, I don't know if, I think it's not metaphorically, though. She's actually being raised by a theme park. But let's not dig too deep. You don't need to make any sense of it. Let me give you these aren't exactly rules, or I guess they're kind of guidelines, not parameters. Parameters, it sounds a bit like rules, but more like with parallel lines or something. But so here's what the thing is. This is a podcast you don't need to listen to. You can kind of listen to it. You can tune it in. You can tune it out. You can turn it down. You can turn it up. However you wish. You can totally listen to me, as some people do, during the day for chilling. Some people do it during the day or anytime when it's 4:20 anywhere. Some people use it, they can't sleep, and I'm here the whole time. But you don't need to listen to me. I'll be here, but you don't have to listen. If you like to, if you need to, I'll be here to keep you company. But you're under no pressure to listen, and you're under no pressure to fall asleep. The shows are about an hour, so you can take your time getting there. Because I'm here to keep you company, take your mind off of stuff, distract you. And I mean, like, I want to talk about a kind of distraction. I had this dream last night. Usually I don't lead intros with dreams, but this one really stuck out to me. This dream's kind of like meandering, and I think it'd be a good, like, usually I like to use these intros to try to make a metaphor about what the podcast, like how it works for new people, but everyone's different. So, but I don't usually talk about my dreams, but I had this dream, and it was related to something that kind of influenced the podcast and someone that I look up to, and also tangentially related to someone else I look up to. And I don't know how many people watched the Guild web series, back in the day, back in the day, 2007, I guess that was a while ago. But it was something I really loved, the web series, which two of the stars are Felicia Day and Sandeep Parikh. And I really have a soft spot for both of them and the show and all the other characters. But Sandeep is the one that was in my dream. And in the dream, he was let's see, we were in some sort of second floor cafe, and he was kind of coaching me. I was trying to write jokes about cake, I think for a podcast monologue, because it seemed like I was just talking about cake, C-A-K-E, the actual, the thing and the ingredients. And I was going off in this tangent, and he was in the dream, he was a friend. In real life, I only know him as a celebrity that I look up to. And, I know that, what is it, Melania Weintraub, I think, and he'd do a comedy show, and I had discovered that comedy show by something funny she had done on Instagram about that bus you sleep on that goes from Los Angeles to San Francisco. But anyway, so he, in the dream we were friends, and he was kind of being helpful to me, and he's kind of saying, well, let's see about that joke there. And I said, this is getting pretty Seinfeldian. And he was like, well, I don't know. And we were just talking about the ingredients of cake. And then we ended up running around. And then I ended up putting on, I think we were volunteering at this children's thing. And I was trying to get dressed up in a cardboard robot outfit. And couldn't figure out how to control it. So that was kind of the dream, or the part I'll talk about in the podcast, was him being nice to me, and we were talking about cake. But I think the reason I had cake on my brain is because I recently saw like a live performance of the Illusionist podcast, which Helen Saltzman makes, and it was a wonderful, wonderful performance. And she was making good jokes about cake, which were very funny. And I don't know, ideally, some of those stories from the live show, one of which was an episode, will be in future episodes. So I don't want to talk about it other than say Helen was cracking me up with her talk about cake. And so I planted a seed, and then later in a dream, Sandy was trying to help me be funny, and he was very nice. He seemed like the person he comes across on the Guild and then on YouTube and stuff. Very witty and really nice. So it was my point. I don't know, like my dreams can be like that, like a little bit meandering, but grounded in reality and influenced by something real. And it's nice when you have a dream that's kind of like with nice people. You say, well, this is a dream influenced by Helen. And also I got to meet Martin, Helen's husband, who was the coolest. And because he was playing music at the live show to go along with it. But anyway, but then, and that was influenced by someone that I looked up to. But like the Guild really, like I think a lot of podcasts I listen to, and like people I look up to, like Helen, like influence the podcast currently. And then the Guild, I don't know what it was. There was such a fresh, like it kind of, I don't know if it was unironic, but the way they presented the characters in the Guild, and inhabited them as actors and writers and stuff. I don't know, just really soft, warm place in my heart for that. Really funny. And if you haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out, because it's like, it'll rock your world. I mean, really, you like plan on binging it, because it is very, very hilarious. And like at the time I was watching the Guild, I was trying to write web comedy, so I was looking up to that as like a thing. Like we were trying to make one, me and two other writers, and we would constantly argue, because I'd say, well, on the Guild, and the other writers would start to roll their eyes. And I'd say, did you watch the episode of the Guild that I assigned you? And one of the, we actually ended up, I would write this into the story, because they'd get so, like, it'd be like, well, that's not how Felicia Day does it. So I don't know if I can move forward, because on the Guild, I said, did you see the part where Zabu, whatever. These are, anyway, check out the Guild. And this is, I guess, what's the, I don't know. There's little things that influence the podcast that sometimes I forget to mention. And one of the nice things about loving things, whether it's the Illusionist or the Guild or anything else, is I think it has some sort of positive vibration that helps me create the podcast and create an environment that can be supportive and open to you. Because I said, well, just these jokes that were made, it then influenced this dream where I was being supported in the dream. And then I was actually going out to perform as a robot. I don't think I was going to do any cake jokes as a robot. Those could be funny. And I think it's a way that we're all kind of interconnected, I guess is my point, in that how I appreciate that you are listening but not listening at the same time. And I can be here the whole time to kind of try to put you to sleep, and you can fall asleep whenever you wish. And ideally, I'm setting the tone for you to have nice dreams, whether it's comedians or comedians or whomever. So I guess that's it. That was an interesting little tangent for me. And I want to say thank you to both those people. And hopefully I'll link to what they're doing currently in my show notes. But yeah, hopefully I can set the stage for you to drift off into dreamland. If you're new, thank you for coming by. Now, this podcast, it doesn't work for everybody, so give it a few tries. People say, hey, give it 3, 4, 5, 6 tries. and see if it helps. Like, because you say after the first few tries now, a lot of reviews are saying, oh, then I realized I don't have to do anything or make any sense of this, or you just kind of, it's like sleeping next to a stream or something. Like like I get, like this is a metaphor, I'm like a babbling brook. I'm the baffling babbling brook. Maybe that could be a new one-off story too. The babbling brook, the baffled brook. There we go. Maybe next Tuesday we'll talk about that one. But thank you so much for coming by. I really work hard. I strive and I yearn because I want to help you fall asleep. All right, let's get on with the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our episodic series, not serial, totally episodic, modular in some sense, because you can listen to them in any order. And it's a little bit, it is grounded, but it is a bit surreal. So it's really not a setup, just one character or kind of two characters. And the episode is in a like, you'll figure it out because it's kind of self-contained and part of a bigger world. So either one, that's why it's episodic. All you got to do is settle in. And for the transition, I just want you to settle in and feel like the slow motion, just like the water created like in the water of a fish tank by the fish tank filter. Like the water is moving and maybe the filter's on like full speed. So there's like even a little bit of barely wave action. And we get a deeper look into the aquarium and you see the aquarium rocks and, you know, maybe a couple of decorations and some fake plants and some real plants and some fish slowly making their way around the tank. And then you notice even more the motion of the water of the fish tank and how it reminds you of the motion of the sea or a lake. That gentle up and down rocking motion at the surface. Not really waves, because the fish tank is, not the shore. It's out there. And usually the water action's pretty similar to that. Like something short of a sloshing. And the water's moving. You can get easy rolling motion. And just picture that as we start our story here. Yes, hello, you arrived here. And I remember before you first came, the caretaker had been spending a lot of time here working on things, and I really wondered what the caretaker was up to. I mean, the caretaker had always been working out back, but now the caretaker had taken time inside the attraction and got the ride system operating and the audio, really taking the time to get things set up. But the first thing you noticed when you arrived was that the caretaker had failed to prepare the entrance of the ride. Before the queue. And when you came in and the doors weren't operating properly, the one was just hanging off its hinges and the other one was set up against the side, totally detached. And you came in the entryway and then there was another set of non-operational open doors. That didn't seem satisfying to you, and you found a broom and you started sweeping out all the debris that the wind had blown in, and you worked on the first set of doors. I'm always amazed. I mean, I'd heard from some of the other attractions how you've kind of seen your way to some of these mechanisms or improv solutions. Which, while you didn't get the doors operational because they were automatic doors, you did get them on their hinges and sliders, and the automatic mechanism, you made sure it was disengaged so you could roll the doors open and shut. And that kept the debris from coming into the entrance room, kind of like a chamber to keep stuff from blowing into the queue. And you set to work on the second doors, and you swept out that area, and you even stayed there a few nights. And you got it nice, and you got the signs cleaned off, and you worked on the front of the ride, and you couldn't get it the same because there was those ocean rocks with the fake ocean spray. You didn't even know that was there. But you made sure the sign that said entrance was cleaned off in the arrow. It was like you were really engaged, and I guess I'm not here to offer my opinion to the caretaker. But it was remiss, I guess you could say, to say, hey, what about this entrance? And you fixed that, and you fixed the doors. And then you made your way into the queue, where, again, you've gotten to know those queues in a whole new way, meandering through the ocean dunes with the winding line for the ride, and the grasses and the sound of the seagulls, and the beginning of the narration, and preparing, which was a big leap for my attraction, to prepare the guests to see the seas of the myths, and then the future oceans, and then our present seas. And you had the loop going with that famous narrator, and she would say, what calls us to the sea? Why have we always sought out a solace and adventure in our oceans? Is it because our bodies are mostly made up of water? Or is it because there's a mystery and a myth to the oceans that surround us, the oceans that inhabit us, the oceans of the myth, the oceans of the planning of our future? Join us or set sail for your journey. And then there was the aquapods, they called them. And this was the old Unimover technology, a giant chain of interconnected pods, or train almost, but a full circle train. And you hit the green button and started the ride up, and everything had been properly greased and lubricated and repaired by the caretaker before your arrival. And the ride started to move, and since you had never been on it before, you didn't know the parts that were missing. It all seemed mesmerizing to you. And it began, the narration, the same narrator as from the queue. Welcome to the seas of our myths. And the ride kind of set off. It was interesting as you wrote it and rewrote it and paid attention, because obviously not all of these were even myths that were familiar with the guests. And this was one of those rides that never really had a line because of both the technology of the Unimover. And it was kind of like semi-popular, and because our ride was structured with nearly no bottlenecks, that it benefited from riding it over and over again. So as the narrator explained, delving deep and exploring the myths of the seas and the oceans and the lakes and the rivers all around us, all around our world. And there was a lot of cool things that the caretaker was able to return to working order, puddles turning to ash rays, and then someone riding a brook horse, and that was just a projection on a wall. He said, is that a horse made of a brook or a horse from a brook? And then diving to the famous worlds, and going by places like Atlantis, and even the sea pods traveling through and having sound effects and Lemuria and Mu, Jengu, seeing merpeople, the libraries of Atlantis they seemed to fixate on, and it even smelled like paper. Now, not to you, that feature wasn't restorable. The kingdoms of the sea monkeys, which had been in later times become a new important myth, and also combined with the nostalgia of intergenerational. But these were the sea monkeys of myths, talking and celebrating, and their counterparts or their parallel, the blue men and women ruling and then encountering the sea monkeys. Some of this was done in just the murals, but you studied it all. And then one big right-hand turn with a ride, avoiding Ben Yip, and going and seeing Nemo, Captain Nemo. And also Nemo, there's a little tribute of Nemo, the other one. The Captain Nemo playing his organ and then breaking the wall and talking, saying, this is the part of the ride where we deal with the other part of the myths, undersea friends. Nemo didn't do that in quotes. He was much more straightforward with his language. But then we set forth and met Cedo and Panlong. There was a Chessie in the further right side background of the Chesapeake Bay, and Nessie on the other side of a mural, with their heads randomly projecting them, rising up in sea dragons and leviathans and krakens and unsiglia. And then it talked about even more shrouded mysteries as the song of Fosse Grimm carries you on the air, or is it the song of the sirens that the sailors would hear? And passing through and hearing the narrator comment on the Fortunate Isles and Formosa and the Bermuda Triangle, and explaining why humans had made those into places of popular myth, or ancient myth, or what was once popular becomes ancient. And there was the sea of myth that was also just way out there and hilarious, like the little kappas, whose heads were like bowls of water running along and spilling the water out of their heads. And then Avalon and Marsburg, a vortex, the lady of the lake smiling and guiding, laughing and lovely, and mermaids and nereids and Rucala, Selkies, and there's so many. I mean, some of these I didn't even remember. You would ride it again and again and watch them. They were all mostly based in, other than the surreal creatures, very humanoid. So again, you'd watch the sea monkeys and they'd seem to be debating something, or the blue men and women conducting some sort of forum, or the mer people planning and reinforcing, or again, the way they progressed Atlantis and talking about the different myths of Atlantis, and was it a continent and was it below the sea? Where was it? Was the library intact? And you rode it again and again, and sometimes you would get off and see a spot that the caretaker had missed, or see something that wasn't working right, the turn of a head that was a little bit jerky, and you'd see if you could fix it, or a scrape on the wall. You would run back to where you had things stored, like paints and wires and tools, mostly in that anteroom in your bag you carried with you. And you would kind of plus the ride, and you enjoyed how it moved so slowly. And this was just the first part. And I liked how you would just, most of the time, just climb out and walk all the way back. Guests never had that option. They would ride it from the seas of the myth into the seas of the future. But you had that luxury. And you over and over again. But mostly at some point, you stopped analyzing it for the myths and started looking for the errors, and then just riding it. I don't know. I was wondering what you were waiting for before moving into the future. But I think it was a matter of you at some point. They never talked about this with any of the other attractions, but wondering if someone was coming after you. And I never had time to contemplate it till now that, were you mirroring the caretaker in some way? Was this intentional or natural, or just who you were slowly becoming? Or was it a fantasy? I didn't know. Were there people coming behind you? Or were you just preparing for an imaginary friend or a follower? I say, well, if I was, if this is my home, are there other children here somewhere or not? And I said, oh, is she doing this? Or I said, maybe she just is very sensitive to details and she likes to make sure the moon and the way the wind was blowing, where the sirens and Fosse Grims were singing, that she wanted the moon that way, and the clouds to be as billowing and flowing as the creators attempted to make them. And then you would soak in the ride and go all the way back to the entrance, make sure your doors were closed and nothing was blowing in. No debris or anything was clogging up the queue or the anteroom. And I guess you had the fullest descent into the myth of the sea. In some ways, I wish, as I heard many guests talking from different places in the world, or different collection of knowledge of the world, saying, oh, that is this myth from this place. Or, oh, we studied that myth in the history of this or that. Or that was on that cartoon show, the sirens or whatever. I wish you had had access to that history, to the history books or the classes at a school or university, or the cartoons. I wondered, I had never seen these, but I had heard different guests say, oh, that was like when Goofy went to Rome. There was one part, or, oh, I had the sea monkeys on the box. Nothing like that. Or who's that? Was that horse made of water? Or laughing at the kappas. No one said, where is that from? That's strange. Their heads are bowls, and they're just running around. They're trying not to spill the water out of their heads. And the lady of the lake and her sly, comforting smile. Saying, what was it? Is that from? What's that from? And always people would get, oh, that's Queen Isabella of the Sea, or, whatever. A lot of people, there was just so many guests that got it wrong. But none of that mattered to you. None of that was really a big deal at all. You just seemed to want to make things the best you could, and you still seemed to enjoy it. But at some point you decided to move on and ride the rest of the attraction. A few times you fell asleep and accidentally did ride it. But you seemed content to stay in the seas of mist for a long time. And then it moved into the seas of the future, the oceans of the future. I forget what the narrator says, because that part was a little shorted out. It said something like, the seas of the future start in our distant past, always calling us ahead. But in order to move ahead, we have to look backwards, all the way back to 700 A.D. in the Tonka people. And the ride showed them painting the seas and the innovations of Buckminster Fuller. Became geodesic domes, these geodesic containers that would float throughout the sea, trying to create something that was both sustainable and humane for the fish out in the oceans. And then it went on to start to show how non-ocean friendly technology was slowly going to be converted to much more environmentally friendly things, and how oceanic cities that were portrayed in these beautiful ways and these faux vistas that you could get off and look. And that was another thing. You replaced the little light bulbs on these giant platforms, and it showed how harnessing the power of the waves and the sun. And then we descended underneath, even though it was just a trick of light and paint and water sounds, showing what was called thermic conversion in the way the water moved within the ocean, just like the wind in the air, and how that could also be harnessed to power these cities. And eventually, the narrator said, power on the land, and how they could fix some of the other things, capturing humongous amounts of carbon dioxide and these oceanic cities with these giant pins, with the waste of the cities becoming essential, with the algae taking in all the CO2 and gently going down to the bottom of the ocean. And as we got deeper, we began to get a view of where you might live under the sea if you didn't live on the surface in one of the great interconnected surface cities or former platforms. Seeing these interconnected pods, some that could also be on the surface, and some pods that would just sink during times when it was rough on the surface. I think I forgot they had to sneak that in there. But the cities below the sea were much less cities than interconnected camps in some way, or stations. And some of it was also based on science fiction, some fun and some more futurism based. But there were scenes, cartoony scenes of adults and children leaving to commute by personal submarine. And kids, the sub bus is here to get you. You know, don't forget to wear your flippers. And views of the future of the sea from the 1920s and 30s, the 50s and 60s, all the way up until the time the ride was constructed. And we went down to Neptune base, full of aquanauts, as they called them. I forget which year. This was a vision of the future, but it was modular homes and science pods, the arboretum with artificial light and some light even piped in from the surface. And they said all this plant life's here to make it feel a little bit like a home. And then you passed different views of people exploring the ocean with these hookah lines, where they didn't need suits or even tanks, just a line attached to their home, or oxygen sub following them out there, swimming in the sea, getting it around. And then we went to the deep sea and saw the reinforcements in the future and the curious things of the unexplored areas yet to be unexplored, and comparisons to the moon and all those things. But when you started rewriting this part of the ride and I guess you weren't refurbishing it. You were still furbishing the ride, just like you had done with the myths. You seem to be obsessed with this one part, with the more cartoony but reality-based future of the sea, the life of the undersea chef. Of course, it was one of the sillier characters from our park pretending to be an undersea chef on Neptune base, and explaining how hard it is to cook under pressure, and that the character was sweating under pressure, jokes about that, and then jokes about how down under the sea you have to be careful because the smells are so much stronger. And you seem to get all those jokes, I guess because of all the body language. It was so much based on that, and the character bringing stuff out, even though it might look delicious. Everyone saying, whew, I never smelled turkey under pressure before, or, overcooking something, toast or whatever. You found that hilarious. And I would say, well, it's kind of middling. You also studied the children after they headed off on their aqua bus. Some of the children went to a virtual academy with kids on the surface and the screens and the virtual reality that showed their classmates or their teacher. And there's always in these, even in not just in our park, there's always a seal that is a family pet or a dolphin. And in this case, the seal kind of barking and interrupting the class. And you would go and pat the seal on the head. And that was kind of the carrying of the ride towards the end and the main message. It seemed like you liked the children, but you knew they were just tronics, and older tronics at that, so almost more moving mannequins. But you paid attention to how they said, and in the future, it's extra important. They did it subtly at first with the classroom saying, now, how's everyone's project going on deplasticization? Or what have you learned about carbon dioxide, Franny? And all of that. But they talked about how the children are supposed to be good stewards of the sea and not repeat the mistakes of their ancestors. And this was the last transition of the ride, kind of the underlying point of the ancestors who saw the ocean as boundless and limitless, who took the seas for granted, as the narrator said, who built in awe of her power, but never contemplated her fragility, who never realized the interconnectedness of all things on land and sea alike, and how the children were learning important lessons on how to restore all visions for the future, to ensure the future of the seas. And then it kind of was building again towards what you were going to get next on my attraction. And it said, as you depart soon for Sea Base Moo, You'll learn how to recognize and respect and value and protect our living seas. The sea's so important to our myths. The sea's so important to our future. The seas that make up, they said the statistics of how much it makes up a person and the planet Earth. And it said, now, as you depart your aquapod, you'll board an aquavator to carry you thousands of fathoms below the sea to Moo Base. So please collect your belongings and your young ones and watch your step as you step to the left on our moving walkway. And thank you from the seas of the past, from the seas of the myths and the sea of the future. We thank you. And something about, again, the audio, but it said your departure to Moo Base. And then as you got off, there was some of the audio was still working that had been restored. It said you're going to board an aquavator, and there was banks of aquavators that you were supposed to line up for. And I said, well, she's never been on an elevator before. They said that the aquavators will take you deep below the surface to the largest aquarium of its kind in the world, where all the different oceans of our planet are represented, all teeming with life. This is a real science-based aquarium where we're testing out new ideas every day and how to ensure the future of our flourishing seas, where we work on solutions so we don't repeat the mistakes of our past. And we ensure that the chains that interconnect all of us in something. But then as you got to the door of the aquapod, a lot of the aquapods were, they were more blocked off, or you couldn't even recognize your door. But the closest one to the ride exit, had a little chain across the door with a sign on it. And the sign said, thank you for your patience, undersea explorers. We're preparing for our newest undersea guests. So something like, I think you were supposed to take it that the aquapods were closed, and you tried to open the door. You didn't realize the sign was handwritten. I said she didn't recognize the sign was handwritten. By the caretaker, of course, I believe. But the chain was easily removed, but the doors were fused together, welded together, plastic. So despite your pushing and trying to restore the power and see where the power to the button that opened the door went, it wouldn't open. And then finding where the ride operator would actually open the door, that button, it still didn't open. And you were sticking things and prying and pulling and yanking, but nothing worked because the doors were welded or melted together, I guess, in some sense. I don't know if you can weld plastic, but you wouldn't give up. And eventually you found something to start chiseling away and scraping away in between the two doors. And little bit by little bit, when you persist, nothing seems to be able to stop you. You were not deterred at one bit. You eventually got through. It took you a while, and I think it was good for your shoulders and your forearms. You eventually slid the doors open with little ragged plastic tendrils hanging from them on the edge. And you boarded the aquavator and you looked around, and I think you got the general idea from other attractions. It had room. It had a floor with a little glass viewing area and a glass viewing area at the top and windows, like a glass elevator, though there was nothing on the other side of the glass other than the chamber you were in. And you got an idea for the button, and then you slid the doors closed. And at first nothing happened, and you realized, I have to figure out, the ride operator. So you did that, but since the doors were kind of detached anyway, you were able to start the aquavator and jump right in and close the doors. And it began to vibrate, and the narration on this was not really working. But then the rumbling of the elevator as it seemed to descend, and then the bubbles just started to, so you couldn't see out the window or below you because the water was churning so much and bubbling and bubbling and bubbling as the ride descended. And then the audio did kick in at some point, and it was a deep, hollow voice, almost like something like thunder in a tin can, now entering Moo base, 30 fathoms below surface, depressurization beginning. And then the bubbles changed and some sound effects and air effects came on, though you did not know that. And the shuddering stopped and the motion stopped. And there was another set of doors on the other side of the aquavator, but they didn't open. And at first you didn't really enjoy that. And you tried to pull the doors open, and you thought about how deep is 30 fathoms? How far did we just travel that I'm friggin' stuck on this aquavator? And then you really worked at the doors, and you had brought your chisel, and you stuck it in the door, and the door was not welded. It was, there was something on the other side. So you were able to get the doors open a little bit, but you needed something else, because whatever it was like a thick bar. You just couldn't get through it. You thought about your tools, and you said, how do we get it? And then you pulled it out, and you said, how do we get this elevator up? And you grew frustrated. And then you wondered how, what's up with the other doors that it came through. And you went to slide them open to see if they would just be on the other side of wherever you descended to. And as you slid the doors open, you realized you hadn't traveled anywhere. It opened up to the exit of the Unimover ride, right where you had boarded. You hadn't traveled an inch. It was all an illusion. And then you replayed the illusion again and again, starting the descent of the aquavator. And I think you found that amusing, heading down to Moo Base, 30,000 fathoms or whatever, and watching the flowing bubbles and the rumbling and the tumbling, all an illusion. The aquavators are part of a good show, I would have said to you if they could speak to you directly. You smiled again and kind of had a chuckle. And then you went and you got your saw, and you worked your way through the bar on the exit door and did some pulling and some twisting and some pushing. Eventually got those doors loose as well. And you slid those doors open and you stepped into another world, a world so much different than what it once was. And if it was anyone else from the time the park was in operation, it would have seemed very bleak to their eyes. But to you, it was just more of a curious sight. And there was an ancient vegetal smell in the air, hanging everywhere. And you didn't know that this was once a giant undersea aquarium, even though they said it in the audio. You hadn't been, I don't know if it was a series of aquariums or both. Once it was full of water and full of life and fish and plants. But all you saw as you walked around were broken windows, giant broken windows, looking out on an empty landscape that in some sense reminded you of a real version of the Dark Side of the Moon ride that you had been on, full of rocks, dark with old vegetation and dust everywhere, covering everything. You walked around and it looked terribly, uncleansly, like it really needed a touch-up and incredibly boring. And of course your suspicion was raised. What was this, or what is this, or why am I here? And it took a while of walking before you saw that the little panels were set where the windows once were, the viewing portals or whatever they called them, the fish spotter guides. And you wiped the dust off and saw how they described what fish you might be seeing in each window and what plants and other friends under the sea, how to identify them. Why they had a beak, or, why their fins were set this way or that way, what ocean we were looking in on, what depth. And as you read these and wiped more of them off, you puzzled and tried to look at them and picture what you should have been seeing versus just this rockscape that you were viewing across or down into. And, of course, it didn't take long for you to climb in there and start to examine the stone and the rock work and dust off the coral and everything that was left behind, the faint traces of once was. You stood in there, and sometimes 2 or 3 stories down, looking around. And that instinct you've carried with you from attraction to attraction seemed to kick in, that you started this journey with. And you set to work cleaning and picking things up. But you started with the glass from the windows. And I thought about it. You didn't have a lot of experience with that. And you piled it up into different piles and different shapes, and it looked like you were kind of like a guest plotting out how they were going to solve a jigsaw puzzle. And you tried sticking them together and looking at the windows and the edges. You had that furious focus of where to start, to where to begin your fixing. Sweeping or finding the air filtration, or getting into the empty aquariums, trying to process what they'd be like full of water. And I think even when you started, you could see the futility of your actions, but at the same time you refused to acknowledge that. And you kept walking around and waiting for a plan to kick in until eventually it kind of dawned on you that this wasn't a monumental task, but an impossible one, to restore the world's largest working aquarium to order. And it made you glare at the vacant space all around you. Almost like you could will it to return to a flourishing fish fest. And even after realizing and you couldn't fix it, that you couldn't set this ride back in some order, you seemed to just stomp around inside the aquarium, kind of pouting, I guess. And eventually you hopped into this one canal. You wanted to walk every inch of it, I think, hoping something would present itself. And you really seemed fed up, and you started banging on this. At the end of the canal, there was this giant metal door. You were banging on it, and I didn't realize maybe it was out of inquiry, but I think it was out of irritation. When you banged on it, after the 3rd or 4th bang, it caught your attention because it wasn't an empty, hollow bang like when you banged on the doors of the aquavator. And it wasn't a solid, empty splat bang like when you go against the concrete that it doesn't wield at all. It was a different sound, almost a plunking sound. And you explored the edges of the door, And you scrambled up and you started calculating that there was something on the other side of that wall you hadn't seen. And eventually you had to go up and you had to really explore to find an exit out of the back of the attraction. They'd put a lot of old storage in front of those exits. So you had to move a lot of old junk and things and presentations and all those things. You shifted all this out of the way and you found a door and exited into another part of the ride that guests could only go on a reserved tour for. One of the sustainable parts of the ride, outdoors with just a net overhead to shield the full sun from the back. And out there was the aqua farm. And there were still pens, including the one up against the canal that would sometimes, the fish were at times able to freely flow from the ride in and out, or the aquarium. A working fish farm with bubbles bubbling and fish swimming. And when they saw you, they immediately remembered that the caretaker is the one that feeds them. So the fish rushing around to get a view of you, and you smiling and laughing and seeing these fish in these really, really nice pens that allowed them to swim in circles. All the informational things were still there. So you read it, and then you found the tour guide's guide, a book, and you read through, and you read about how often the fish are fed every day. And you even found a grease pencil and a laminated card with the schedule of when the fish were. And you kind of determined that someone had been feeding these fish. In fact, these were the fish that were feeding you from time to time. And you fell into a routine of always returning here and feeding the fish, of taking over the care of the fish and the replenishing of the water. As you read more and more about it, the checking of the filters, the skimming of the surface, you became the caretaker of the fish farm and keeping it operational. And I said, well, that's a little bit different than fixing a giant sea-based aquarium. But you kept it going, and I didn't know at some point if you would make the connection that the caretaker, but I think you knew that. I guess I did forget, because you read, since the tour guide talked about how these are the fish served in some of our finest restaurants. And you seemed pleased, despite not being able to fix my entire attraction. You were still able to sustain an upgrade and maybe maintain for those who would come after you, whether that was an imagination or true. You kept things going and you made them a little bit better. And you accepted when the job was just too big or not worth your time. And so thank you for keeping the bubbles flowing and, having fun on that aquavator. And, I get to see you whenever you come to feed the fish, which is great for me. And I'll talk to you soon.